these games, they experience like having a live service game, having again the pajamas, the comfortable pajamas this person's going to put on and just feel good in. They don't all live forever.
Hmm.
In fact, I would say most of them die. Some of them have very long lifespans. Counter Strike, I think, being a prime example, 25 plus years and going strong. Uh, like very very cool to see. But these games encounter unique challenges, and some of them don't overcome those challenges. Like there's a lot of live service games, a lot of MMOs in the past that either in the pre-WoW or even the post-WoW era that did pretty well, but then vanished, like slowly sort of disappeared and fell off. I think I personally, and this makes me super sad because I was a huge fan of like Halo is like a game that just was a dominant behemoth as a live service product and just slowly like not anymore, not anymore. I'm not saying you're not going to sell a Halo product if you make one. You are like 343, go ahead and, or now Halo Studios, go ahead and make a Halo game. I hope it's great. I will play it. But it's not where it was. It doesn't occupy that same market position. And so these games face unique challenges. From your perspective, looking at live service, what do you see as the unique challenges? Things like League and Counter Strike and World of Tanks and Warframe and like all these different things. Like what are the things that we're learning about in these last 2 decades of live service?
When I think about these games of like who are the winners and losers, where are you, the 25-year behemoth, the 2-week death, or that thing that's in between, the I was around for a couple of years but it kind of petered out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those games in the middle are good games. And I think we've talked
Yeah.
about that a little bit before with like Rip the Cycle. The Cycle has been my favorite extraction game. Rest in peace, King. Um, but it's a really good example of the kinds of things that live in that almost mid market. And a unique factor that I think has overshaped our industry conversation is what mid market means within the context of live service games, and what mid market
Mm.
means in the context of non live service games or
Hmm.
low live service games, because we've seen a new rise of the mid market in the light to no live service or $40 box space. Space Marine 2, Helldivers, is live service, but it's co-op, so it was a little bit different. We're starting to see more come out in that kind of mid market, but they're not occupying that black hole game space where it's like, this is where I spend the propensity of my gaming hours. The competition for live service hours is so high that mid market, if you don't win, you lose. And it's just how slowly you lose. I don't see that changing. I see that getting worse. I don't see I see the incumbents changing. I see our Overwatch 2 rivals. I see us discovering new needs, the rise of extraction, and new ways to meet new player needs and offer new types of experiences that are undone. That's where your new opportunities are. But I think really, if we look at like what kills Counter Strike, what kills League, what kills WoW, what kills the behemoths, and the answer is obsolescence in themselves are the only two things, and those are really hard to actually make manifest, right? So what killed the RTS? The MOBA. Not because MOBAs are better than RTS at being RTS, because the reasons players, it seems, I think, my opinion, the reasons many non super hardcore players were playing RTS was to get the experience that they could get in MOBAs, and MOBAs was delivering those needs much better for a high propensity of players. So when people, we see Tempest Rising coming out and stuff like that, and I'm very skeptical of the revival of RTS because the landscape has not changed in where those needs are becoming more relevant, better to meet with this form factor. Um, these players aren't currently satisfied by the current offerings, and maybe they're not, but I would ask when we're making something like an RTS or something that's in a genre that feels like it might be like in obsolescence or being obsoleted, what needs from even the go back to StarCraft 2 right now, still alive, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, there's problems. What are the real problems you would solve? How do those matter and how do those scale? And if you don't have really good answers to those questions, I'm like, you probably shouldn't do that. League will die, Dota will die when and if somebody else finds a better way to meet that need, or under the weight of its own size and scope and crushing itself, the Overwatch problem of the weaknesses become clear enough that it's time for somebody else to move in and take that space. I think the behemoths eventually crack, but they crack to things that come in and understand it, and it takes a long time for those cracks to develop in a lot of
Yeah,
cases.
it's almost like you have to age out the population too at the same time
Right.
because, like, I remember somebody telling me when I first got to Riot, honestly, we could stop development right now and League would probably still run for another 4 or 5 years
Mm-hmm.
as an insanely profitable, highly successful game if we did nothing but just kept the servers running. Now
Mm-hmm.
that's not actually nothing. There's a lot of work
Yeah,
involved in
yeah,
that,
yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah.
obviously you need a much smaller organization to do that and so there are some few games in that space but there was this idea of it would eventually die
Mm-hmm.
if you stopped. In game and software development, we spend so much time estimating, and it often feels like a burden that just takes a bunch of time but doesn't really add much value. My name is Benjamin Karsage. I've created a course called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development. This is actually something people out there asked for when I was looking at what would be helpful to you, what course could I build. Estimation was the number one thing you picked, and I can understand why. Everywhere I've gone in our industry and in software generally, I see teams struggling with estimation, fighting with a sense of false precision, and generally going through the motions rather than really getting value out of all the time they're spending. And in my time, both in the military, in software development, and game development, I've been able to successfully predict the completion of large projects. I've seen other people do the same, and so I know it is possible. If you want to be doing that for your team, if you want to be advancing your understanding of estimation and how it can help you, this course is for you. A quick overview of what we cover. We start by discussing the state of estimation today, why it's so challenging, and why are we all doing it and continuing to do it even though it doesn't seem to add that much value. Second, we talk about calibration, how we can become better calibrated estimators and train others to be the same. Third, we talk about how to get ready to estimate, who should be estimating, what are we actually estimating, how do we set up ourselves to succeed and to avoid the individual biases and fallacies that prevent our estimates from being good. Finally, at least for early access, we talk about tools, techniques, the approach. What are the ways that you can actually create estimates that add value? And when should you not use those techniques and use others instead? In the future, we're going to be releasing even more modules where we cover things like how to estimate things that aren't just how long a project might take, but to think about money and resources and so many other things that we end up estimating, value and whatnot. The 6th and 7th modules talk about small and large scale estimation and really try to make all of what we've talked about so far practical. And those modules will be coming in the future. For right now, we're focusing on those first 4. And as a result, we're keeping this course in early access at a lower price. As more modules come out, that price will go up. So get it today while it is as low as it'll be, and you will get all the future sections as well as those first 4. It's already 15 hours of content and more than 20 worksheets, templates, and examples for you to take away. I also interject stories from my own experiences, both failures and successes, of how estimation has gone well and poorly and what you might be able to learn from those things. So there's a lot of tools here, there's a lot of resources. This is a problem we're all facing because we all spend so much time doing this, and I think we get way too little value out of it. I think we could be spending less time and getting more value and really helping our teams succeed, creating the software, the games that will really please our audience and players. If that's something you're interested in, check out the course. It's funny, I actually say RTS. I point to 2. MOBA's the big one. The other one is tower defense, and it's interesting that I
Oh
think
yeah,
both of those
yeah. I agree.
emerged out of. I guess tower defense is actually a weird one where you don't have as many like. It's people treat it more as a single player experience. It's not the same, but you go in and you're like building, and both genres actually emerged from the RTS mod space largely. In terms of where they became popular, like old Sunken Defense in StarCraft Brood War on BattleNet. But yeah, so there's this way that like if you were to turn off, like if Counter-Strike or Valve, and this is actually a question I have for you. My assumption is something like what that person told me when I got to Riot, which is, hey, if we stop development, the game would continue to go for some amount of time, but eventually it would die. Counter-Strike is an interesting example of a game with very few changes over a very long period of time. Admittedly, Counter-Strike 1.3, 1.6, Go 2, like they did increase, but a lot of it was actually very much honoring what was already there. And I remember when they like added the new weapon, like was the revolver, I think. They were like, "Oh, we're adding a revolver," and people were like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 hang on!" Like, wait, that you get a lot of like, "What are you doing? What are you do?" Like, don't, it's perfect. Don't touch it, right? And it's that's not actually what it, like that's not true. But there's this idea of, hey, this is meeting the need, and so if I take the perspective of, sorry, this is such a rambly question, but if I
Sorry.
take the perspective of, hey, eventually this will die if we stop development. Versus, so that argument is basically you have to keep changing, you have to keep iterating, you have to keep adding and removing and shifting and adjusting. And you see games like League of Legends very much in that space. Like famous for the 2 week patch cadence and sort of set the standard there. And then you have something like Counter Strike, very few changes over very long periods of time. If you just kept the servers running, would this just keep going in perpetuity, right? Would you, or would again you eventually like have your players sort of die out of playing it? And so curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I get to give you my favorite design answer of all time is it depends.
That's the favorite production answer
It
of all time
is.
too.
It is. Lawyers, producers, designers.
That's
No,
right.
I think what it depends on, though, is interesting. Is how much of your game. There's basically kind of two major components that you can fill up the bucket with that I think create replayability, right? It's more specific than this, but if I try to boil it down, mastery and novelty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how reliant on each part of your game is it to create freshness, replayability, and desire to play again? I think League was is a game that has a big mastery curve, but it's very content based because the map doesn't change. The area is fixed and the skill expressions are varied, but you want new stuff to play with to change the environment that you are playing in, what you're playing against. So League,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is more novelty driven than something like Counter Strike, which is highly mastery and almost no novelty driven. One of the most conservative communities. Something definitely learned that working on Valorant is a
Yeah.
lot of hardcore communities have a lot of conservatism of like not wanting a lot of change, liking how things are outside of like
Yeah.
very, very, very deep in the weeds kinds of changes that are like really particular. Like, oh, I wish the screen lag was zero point 0.5 seconds better on this. Like, nobody even notices that other than this group.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's why I say it depends. It depends on your community and it depends on your game and how much it is. I have based fixed mastery, and what we're chasing is precision, perfection, ideal state, optimal play, and perfection. Counter Strike is a game about that. Counter
Yeah.
Strike is a game about
Yeah.
perfection. And the chase of perfection is endless because you can't actually be perfect. And so the mastery loop for the deepest player is high, and the mastery loop for casual players is clear. It feels really good when you get a headshot. It feels really like you have big pop off moments that keep you excited. Counter Strike is a environment that survives with low novelty, and in fact, I think the hardest core of that community would appreciate the fewest changes of all time. League of
Yes. Yeah.
Legends, and I think especially let's even go into Marvel or Overwatch, are high
Yeah.
novelty environments because the character experience leads. Therefore, more characters are more variety of mastery, and even though my depth of mastery can't go quite as deep as a Counter Strike level mastery, perfection isn't as hard to reach in League as it is in Counter Strike.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Mm-hmm.
still hard. Like we're talking about
Yeah.
differences of like different tiers of gods at this point, right? But it's
Right.
still it's still different. And because of that, does your game require a constant injection of novelty? Well, does it benefit from it? Does it then require it for engagement? And if so, and I think this is the question you want to go to, how much, when, and why?
Yeah. There's another angle I'll throw on this too, which is once you've established your norm, now you have a self-selected player
That's
base
right.
that is interested in one or the other in a very meaningful. Maybe you were saying that and I missed it, but like that idea of like if I'm playing League, I or Marvel Rivals, or even something like World of Warcraft, I need that injection. Like World of Warcraft is a far more extreme example in some sense because of the size of the expansions that they're building and the change that they're injecting into the game on a regular basis. But like I know that's why I keep playing. I know I will run out of content. This will end up feeling samey at some point for me, and I appreciate that there's an injection of change. And what's interesting for me is that pushed me out of some of those products. They injected change into World of Warcraft with a new expansion at one point, and I just stopped playing.
Yep.
I was done. They told me to go harvest wolf spleens again, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I refused. I was like, look at how powerful I was. You just raised level cap by 10. This isn't fun for me anymore, right? And again, nothing wrong with what they did. Tons of players loved it. They were like, oh, yes, a new expansion, something to dig my teeth into. I didn't like that. Same thing with League. I was a jungler. They kept changing the jungle. And after like 4 seasons of having to relearn the meta junglers, I was just like, that's it. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. If you want me to play, I'm just going to tinker around on like Sona support or something, because at least that hasn't changed too much, right? And I don't want to relearn this every time. It's too much change inside of the system. If you lead teams in game or software development and you're tired of wasteful and unreliable estimation, I've built an online course just for you. It's called Advanced Estimation for Game and Software Development, and it's a self-paced course with over 15 hours of content, real-world examples, and tools you can start using right away. Estimation doesn't have to be a morale-draining mess. Planning doesn't have to feel unrealistic and contrived. You can do better, and this course will help. Early access is now open with lifetime access and a big launch discount, but there's limited seats at this price point. Check it out at this URL or in the show notes below.